Here are a few examples of the project we're going to be doing today. This is a fun and really easy technique called a watercolor resist, which I'm sure many of you have done before. In fact, if we have any watercolor resist fans or resist experts out there, please let us know in the chat. What you're going to need for this project, if you want to take a couple minutes to go grab your supplies if you don't already have them with you, you're going to need a piece of thick white paper, like a watercolor paper or poster board, something a little bit heavier weight, some oil pastels or crayons, some watercolor paint, a cup of water, a paintbrush or two, some paper towel if you'd like, scissors, and some kind of glue. And you can choose to either print some images of pronghorn. We had a sample for you like this with a couple different types, or you can try and draw your own, which I'll spend a few minutes drawing these guys here if you can see them. You might want to tape your paper down to your table like I've done here. That just helps keep your edges from rolling up and gives you a nice clean edge when you remove the tape. So masking tape is really great for that. And you can use your own creativity with this project. You do not have to follow what I do exactly. You can use any colors that you like and have fun with it. And if you have any questions at any time for me, feel free to put them in the chat. So the National Museum of Wildlife Art is in Jackson, Wyoming. Do we have anyone here who has visited there before? You can tell us in the chat if you've been there. If you have not, I do want to mention some really great resources that you can use, even if you don't have a trip planned. You can go to www.wildlifeart.org/art/collection, and that's a really fun search the collection feature, so you can look up a specific artist or a topic that you're interested in. We also have mobile tours that you can take, so that allows you to tour the galleries from home, and it's a lot of fun. So I want to start by showing you an image by Carl Rungus, because his work really forms the core of the museum's collection. This painting, called Wyoming Sage, was painted in 1902, and Carl spent much more time in the wilderness than other artists. So by directly observing nature, he was able to gain insight into the animals and their environment. And he showed animals in their natural environment, which was really a new idea for artists in North America at the time. Other artists made pictures by studying dead animals or animals in zoos. Rungus was a master at painting the texture of sagebrush, which we will learn today that's a really important part of the ecosystem. And we'll talk about texture a lot today. This painting by Ken Carlson is called Spring Antelope. Spring Antelope. Heather, can you tell us the difference between antelope and pronghorn?
Well, those two names get used interchangeably a lot. In fact, our own agency calls them antelope in our regulations. But actually, the species that we're all referring to are called, technically, they're called pronghorn. But there's lots of different nicknames for them that people use. Some people call them speed goats and things like that. But our pronghorn are not true antelope in North America. They're in their own family. And their closest relatives are actually giraffes. So they're not an antelope at all, but it's just kind of a more common name that people like to use instead of pronghorn.
Okay, good to know. So like Carl Rungus, Ken Carlson also paints sagebrush. And what's this beautiful yellow plant here? Do you know what that is?
Rabbit brush. That's a plant species that's very common in Wyoming, along with sagebrush, and it's one that antelope will definitely eat, especially in the fall.
Okay, great. I love the colors in this piece. The purples, blues, greens, all very cool color temperatures. This painting is a watercolor. So I wanted you to notice the background of this and how this artist chose to sort of depict foliage in a sort of loose way. And we can recreate patterns like this just by using some paper towel and dipping it into our wet paint. So that's a fun sort of technique we can try today. And I'm curious to know what this species of bird is here. I'm not really sure.
I hope some Wyoming natives know what species that is. That's our state bird.
Ah.
Does anybody want to comment what they think that bird is. And people might be still gathering up their art supplies
That is
still.
true.
But that is a western meadowlark, which are very, very common species. They show up here in the springtime, and when I start to hear their voices singing out in the sagebrush in the springtime, it lets me know that winter is hopefully almost over.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Olaf Karl Setzer's Antelope is another watercolor painting, a very small one at just 6 by 7 inches. And I like the way that it shows the animal's environment sort of as separate here, but the animal is still connected in a way. And I especially like the hatching lines on the animal that were drawn in ink after the watercolor was dried. And notice how the lines around the landscape sort of echo the lines on the antelope. I think that really makes it stand out. But for our art project today, I feel really inspired by this painting. As I mentioned, you can choose to create whatever you like. If you want to choose another picture that we saw earlier, you can go to our website and look at images there too. You can choose different colors, that kind of thing. But this painting is by Robert Kuhn, and he had a great sense of humor and came up with really creative titles for his pieces, like this one, which is called Cruisin'. How fast do you think these animals are going? Maybe put it in the chat. How fast can antelope run? And then maybe Heather can give us a clue as to their top speed.
I sure can.
Okay. Speed goats tend to be what I call them.
Yep, it's a really popular name. There's lots of Wyoming businesses that are also named after pronghorn and antelope and speed goats. There's high school mascots and things like that. So all of us are in Wyoming are pretty familiar with them. Somebody has a guess here. Maria has a guess of 65 miles per hour. That's about right. 60 is pretty much their top speed. They can cruise, which is the name of this painting, actually. They can cruise at 30 miles per hour with no problem whatsoever. So they are made to run. That's basically their defense mechanism, is to run away from predators and be able to see them for a long distance, which is why they like open country.
Very nice. So in looking at this painting, I'm curious if anyone can tell me some clues in the chat. What clues do you see that make you think these animals are moving and not holding still? How did the artist depict these? What tricks did he do to make us realize that they're going fast? Think about the position of the body, maybe. There's a hint for you.
The way their heads are held, maybe the way their legs are held.
They kind of put their heads forward, it seems like, when they're running really fast. They kind of drop their head down. And you can see that the legs are bent. And they're kind of leaning forward.
Yep. Kendra says leaning forward. Yeah, and they are, I'm sure most people who have come across a pronghorn have seen them cruise pretty darn fast. And I like this picture too, because it looks like the fall time in Wyoming.
Yeah.
The vegetation is that golden color, and it especially glows in the morning and in the evening when the sun is low.
Ooh,
and
yeah.
the pronghorn do as well. The sun kind of bounces off them, and I like this painting because it captures all of that kind of warm color.
Definitely. It's a very warm color. You can see the brightness of the light shining off of the tail and the top of their heads and kind of the center on the right in the grass. It's very bright yellow and it's beautiful. There's another thing I wanted to point out about the speed, and it has to do with this guy in the upper left corner there, that antelope. You can see that part of his body is cut off. You can't see the whole thing. And that's a great trick that artists will use to sort of show that there's more going on in the scene that we can't quite see. And it makes us think like, oh, he was over here and now he's just barely into our line of sight. And so that's a trick that you can use in your pieces too, if you want to show movement, just cut off whatever's moving in and out of the frame a little bit. And Robert Kuhn had some sort of unlikely inspiration from a very famous abstract artist named Mark Rothko. And this piece is not part of the museum's collection here, but can you see the influence on Kuhn's work?
Such an abstract piece, but the color combinations and the way the canvas is divided into different parts.
Yeah, Mark Rothko is known for these what he called color field paintings, where sort of large swaths of the canvas are painted a fairly flat and a large space of just one color. But Kuhn was really a master of texture. And so I'm wondering, people in the chat maybe leave a comment about what do you think of when you hear the word texture? What are some different textures maybe that you're familiar with? Can you think of any within the environment or particularly within this environment? You mentioned that it looks like fall. Why do you say that in more specifics? Can anyone tell me in the chat, or just think of some words to describe the texture here? And then maybe point out where you see those textures within the painting.
I like this piece too, because I mean, even though it draws upon such an abstract piece, just in its color scheme and in its layout, it's still true to life. I mean, the pronghorn in the image look realistic, which yours don't have to. In fact, I kind of like when they look a little bit abstract, but
Exactly.
the way he captures the habitat, the different plant species, like the close-ups that Rachel's showing you here, just to show you the texture. I mean, those different species of plants, they do have, in real life, they do have different textures. So it's just it's a neat trick for, to me, I'm not an artist, to see someone pay attention to that level of detail. So Maria Lemon says that grasses and brush are what she thinks of related to texture, and the wavy reflecting sunlight off of them.
Excellent. That is true. Wavy lines. To me, these particular plants look pokey to me. They look pokey and crunchy. That's how I would describe them. I'll tell a quick funny story about Bob Kuhn. He passed away a few years ago, but quite a while ago, he was at the museum, and someone asked him, looking at one of his paintings, they asked him, what kind of flower is that in this painting? And he looked at it and he said, I don't know. I don't know if that flower exists, but if it doesn't, it should. So I think that's a good point too for artists, that, you know, there may be things in the painting that you want to be really true to life, like the antelope, but you can play around with the flowers. You can put any kind of flower, made up or otherwise, in there that you like, and that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, artistic liberty is definitely allowed for this session.
Absolutely.
I can't wait to see some of the results.
Yeah. So some textures I'll point out. I said crunchy, dry, rough, smooth, wet, soft, furry, hard, bumpy. Those are all textures. So texture is defined as the feel, appearance, or consistency of a surface or substance. Texture can be actual, as in if you were to touch that plant, or it can be implied. So, for example, you aren't allowed to touch the paintings in a museum, but if you could touch Kuhn's painting, Cruisin', what would it feel like? How do you imagine it would feel? Kuhn uses thicker paint sometimes, and he will often use a tool called a palette knife. So if you were to run your hand over his paintings, you would feel some ridges and bumps in the paint. Other artists paint with thinner paint. Watercolor is a good example, like we'll be doing today. So we're going to be doing implied texture for the most part. We're going to make it look like it's bumpy, even if it feels smooth when we put our hands over it. How are we doing on time here? 2:17. All right. Do we have any questions from anybody? At this point, I think what I'll do is create some of our own art. So if you are just joining us, my name is Rachel Smith, and we are talking about pronghorn and how artists in the National Museum of Wildlife Art have chosen to paint them within their landscape. So I think that we're feeling inspired now, and we'll create some of our own art. So let's do that. And we are going to make a watercolor resist. And this technique is called that because any place you put watercolor paint, on top of a waxy material like crayon or oil pastel, the wax will push away or resist the water. Some people say there are no rules in art, and I happen to agree, but there are a few simple guidelines to follow with this project. The first thing is you're going to want to leave some white areas on your paper. Try not to cover the whole thing with just oil pastel or crayon. And you're going to want to put some pressure down with your oil pastel, or especially with your crayon, just to make sure enough wax gets put down to resist the watercolor paint. And remember that broken crayons and pastels still work. I'm using some little itty bitty stubs today because it's just what I had on hand. The third thing to kind of remember is that when you're using your paintbrush with Resist, you want to use a pretty light touch to apply the watercolor paint. If you push too hard, or if you use too much paint and not enough water, you may find that the crayon or the oil pastel doesn't resist it quite as well. And you may even find that the brush doesn't have to touch the paper at all. You might be able to just, you could just drip the water right off the brush. So we've got my paper taped down, and we've got our image here. I'm actually going to switch to this full size image again, which you probably can't see. All right, so there it is. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to start by drawing the background landscape with crayon. I'm using crayon today. And then we'll paint over the drawing with watercolors. And then at that point, we can add in some pronghorn once the paint has dried. We're going to kind of cut and paste pronghorn into our landscape. And I'm going to start with white crayon, which you're probably not going to be able to see what I'm doing with white crayon. And you won't really be able to see what you're doing if you're using white either. But it doesn't matter, because once you put the watercolor down, you'll see that white, and you can just kind of guess with where your textures are. And I see a lot of circles in this painting in the plants, and a lot of lines. And so if you don't have white, you can use another color, maybe a light color like yellow, or really, like I said, anything that you'd like to do. So I'm going to start drawing in some little circles just to show kind of these little circles in the plants. And like I said, it probably looks like I'm doing nothing, but I've already broken my point there. And we're just gonna and I'm just drawing circles, and then I might actually do some dots too and just kind of color them in, like draw the circle and then color it in. I'll do some yellow ones too so you can see what I'm doing maybe. And like I said, push a little bit with your pens, with your crayon, and just make sure that that's showing up. Any questions so far?
Texture. Sorry, Rachel.
Yeah, no.
So the pieces that you're drawing in right now are kind of the tops of, like, the flower tops of those plants that are in the foreground.
Exactly, and I'm going to put some in the midground too. Foreground's a great word. Thanks for bringing that up.
Sure.
The foreground is where the most detail is, generally speaking, and as you go back, things get smaller when they're further away. And the middle ground is the stuff kind of in the middle here, and then the background is way in the back, and those flowers are really tiny, so I could almost just do little dots. And I think I'm going to switch gears and do some lines now and just kind of draw in some of these cool lines. I'm going to use a brown now and just draw some of these cool lines that he's got down here. And I'm not copying him exactly. I'm doing my own thing here, but you know, it's pretty easy to draw lines and circles. You all should be able to do that. Draw some back here. I also like this bright red. I'm going to pull in some red. It's kind of a purpley red. I like purple and cool colors better than warm. So, and then I'll talk about one more little shape that I see that I think is really cool in Kuhn's piece, and I'm going to do it in white. But he did some, well, here, I'll show you a brown one first. he does a lot of like, there's some of these straight lines and then he puts lines kind of next to it, not necessarily touching it, but just kind of like that. I see that a lot in this piece, and I think that's really fun. An easy way to show, I don't know, grass, I guess. But I think those look particularly cool with white. So I'm just going to kind of put in some of those sort of sideways lines, diagonal lines. We're just having fun with it here.
That's
Heather,
funny.
do you have any
Yeah,
more to say about the landscape? Or
yeah. Well, first off, I didn't even notice that detachment of those kind of diagonal smaller lines
yeah.
until you pointed it out, and then we went back to the enlarged image, and
Oh,
there
we
they
can
are.
go back to that detail.
Yeah, I could see that. That's really cool.
Mhm.
But yeah, this image is kind of. I mean, it's pronghorn habitat for sure, obviously. But it's funny because some of the other example images that we saw before, almost all of them had sagebrush in them, and
Yes.
that is certainly a plant that I associate with pronghorn. So
Uh-huh.
they like a mix of, at least in the state of Wyoming, their favorite habitat is a mix of sagebrush and grasslands and what we call forbs, which are sort
Mm.
of like smaller broadleaf plants that would be coming up right about now at this time of year, but they die back when all of this, when all these other plants turn yellow. But in the wintertime, the pronghorn rely a lot on sagebrush for a food source. But in the image that you guys are using as example, there's no sagebrush. There's
Right.
some other grasses and some other these dried plants with the flowers on the top. Almost to me look like some sort of asters or daisy type plants
Yeah.
that have gone to seed and dried up and then they're kind of fuzzy on top. Um, but but that's also, that's also habitat that pronghorn will use and that you will find, intermixed with sagebrush and grassland. Sometimes you'll find patches of habitat that have no sagebrush in them for one reason or another, and pronghorn will still use them. And in other parts of pronghorn range outside of Wyoming, like in Alberta to the north in Canada, you get more grass as you go in their range to the east into South Dakota. That's grassier and less sagebrush. So it looks a lot like what's depicted in the painting that you guys are using, kind of as your inspiration.
Cool. Yeah, the one of my samples back here, I originally was thinking I would do sagebrush, and then I just saw these white lines, and I was like, oh no, I want to do that.
And
I'm
they
just
use
gonna
all
spend another
use
like
all of
minute
it.
on this.
Yeah,
What's that?
they use all of those different habitats. So I mean,
Right.
and this is a piece of art, so you can do whatever you want with it.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, so I'm feeling pretty good about this at this point. So I think we should switch to paint. I'll give you guys just maybe a few more seconds here to kind of finish up what you're doing with your crayons or your oil pastels. This is really fun to just kind of mess around because it's not serious. This is not, no pressure here,
Mm-hmm.
We're just having fun. So I love that you guys are painting along.
And hopefully everybody is kind of on track with Rachel's pace. If you need a couple more minutes, let us know in the chat, and we can delay. We can fill in some time with a little bit of Q&A, or with some more detail work on everyone else's stuff. But you should be getting close to finished with the background.
Totally. And the painting really won't take very long. We're going to move pretty quickly with the painting.
I can't wait to see like the white parts that I can't see on your paper.
It's so fun. It's magical. You're going to love it.
I can't wait to see it pop out.
And remember where some of those lightest areas are. We're going to kind of keep that in mind right now as we're transitioning into painting. Think about where those really light areas of yellow are and where some of the darker areas are. There's a lot of white on the top of these flowers down here in the foreground. and a lot of really bright yellow over in this kind of middle area here. So with watercolor, once you've put the paint down over the white, you've covered it. It's hard you can remove some of that paint, but you can't get back to the white. So the crayon's a great way to keep that white or light colors on your page. So some people in watercolor, they recommend that you start with the lightest colors first because you can always go darker than lighter. I paint in watercolor and oil, and I kind of do a mixture of those things. And again, I don't really love rules. So I'm going to kind of start with a mid-tone, an area down here in the corner that looks really dark. I'm going to go back to the full image here. See, these flowers down here are really quite dark, and I know that they're going to be dark. So I can go ahead and choose a color here. Maybe I'll move my paints up here for a minute. I'm choosing kind of a brown here, and there's a brownish red that I like a lot right here. It's kind of a terracotta color. See my water right here too. I am using really quite a bit of water in my brush and not a whole lot of paint, especially to start. You can always add more paint, but like I said, it's kind of hard to remove it. So I'm just going to go real gently, see what I've got here. I'm going to make it a little darker than that. And you can kind of get your paper wet first if you want to with just some clear water and then drop a color on top of it and see what happens. But you should see already how that kind of just glides right over your crayon. So I really dig that kind of red color. I'm going to put some of that over here. And there you can see how some of that white is resisting. So I'm just going to kind of choose where I want this sort of reddish tone. I like these sort of bands of color, you know, this sort of Rothko color bands, right? He puts these colors in this piece kind of correlate to the different plants that he's trying to depict. So there's kind of a band here of plants. As you go back into the background, colors tend to get bluer. That's why mountains in the distance look blue. Things that are far away look bluer and cooler in temperature. So I used a slightly cooler brown for this part here. And then he's got this really cool sort of orangey. Let's see. Maybe I'll do a mix of both of these colors and kind of just, I'm going to make a little wiggly line like this to just kind of show this section of a different plant back here.
It definitely gives me a feel of a different texture when you, with the different color and the different method with the brush. That looks cool.
For sure. So now I'm going to come in with some yellow. Maybe I'll do, okay, some of the lightest areas where the sun is hitting is going to be kind of a brighter yellow to just show that sun. Although the problem with that, it's not as much contrast. It doesn't show the white as much of the crayon. So I'm going to use that kind of limited. I didn't put enough crayon over there, but that's okay. It shows up better with this kind of a darker orange. So we're going to focus on that maybe. And you can let your colors blend together. That's the fun thing about watercolor. And if you get too much water, you can take a little paper towel. Like I kind of got a puddle here that I don't like, so I'm going to pick that up. And then, you know, that one painting that we looked at, if you kind of crumple up your paper towel like this so you get some nice folds in it and where the paint is wet, I don't know how well that shows up on the camera, but that'll give you some really neat texture too.
You can definitely see it on the camera. Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good.
It's really cool to see, like I said, the white that I could not see before. As soon as you put the watercolor on it, you can see it appear.
There it is. It's magical. I do feel like I could have done a little more on mine, but that's okay. It looks neat anyway.
It definitely reminds me of like late summer, early fall in Wyoming with all the yellows and the glowing colors.
Right. Okay, so I think I'm basically done with that step. I'll give you guys another minute to finish up, and I'll figure out where I'm going to draw because I didn't really think about that with my setup here.
Ramona says, beautiful, thank you.
Good.
She is enjoying her time. I hope everyone is. We've got people watching from multiple locations and multiple social media types. We've got folks on YouTube. We have people on Instagram, and we also have people on Facebook. So welcome everybody. If you're just joining us, we are Rachel is teaching us a watercolor resist method of painting some habitat, some pronghorn habitat, and we're about to draw or add in some pronghorn to our artwork here pretty soon.
I've just remembered one more little technique though, that if you've ever played with watercolors before, you've probably done this inadvertently if otherwise, but if you get your brush really nice and wet, and I'm going to switch to a round brush now, I had a big flat one before, and I'm going to take a nice bright red and I'm going to put quite a bit of paint on there. I'm going to load it up a little bit like this, and I'm just going to tap it, just kind of flick it and let it fall wherever it falls, and voila, flowers.
Cool.
That's always fun. Okay.
I may or may not have done that as a child and got it on the ceiling of our kitchen.
I would not be surprised.
So everyone use caution. SJ says, this is wonderful. I look forward to watching this again. Yes, we actually are. That's a good cue for me to remind folks. This live session is being recorded, and you'll be able to find it on the Game and Fish YouTube page after we're done. So if you have to take off and leave, if you can't stick around for the whole thing and you want to give this a try later, or if you want to do it over again sometime when we're finished, you can go find it on our YouTube channel.
Perfect. That is good to know. Cool. So I'm going to pull up this painting here and move it. So you should have been able to find a print off from the website of some pronghorn antelope in a couple of different positions. I gave you the option to have some black ones that are just dark, kind of like a silhouette, or one that's like this, and you can kind of layer them and collage them into your landscape once the paint's dry if you like. You can arrange them however you like on your landscape. I actually have one here that I painted here that's dry. So through the magic of the internet, I should not have adjusted my camera because now I've messed it up, but there we go. Okay, so you can find a way to place them in there that makes sense to you and to your landscape, and that looks pretty fun. You could put a whole herd in there. Are groups of pronghorn called a herd, or is there another word?
No, that's what we call them, and they are in different size herds at different times of the year. So right now, with everything sort of turning green with spring, they are spreading out on the landscape in smaller groups. But in the wintertime, you'll find them in huge herds. Sometimes, over 100, 200, 300 of them in a group together, depending on what part of the state you are in and how the winter conditions are. But they'll get into pretty big groups in the wintertime. And like the picture that you guys are using as a reference is kind of a fall depiction of them after the mating season, or the rut. They start to group up again. You'll see there's two bucks in that picture together. During the rut, those bucks will not like each other and they'll fight with one another, but this looks more like a group, I would say like in October, November, where they are grouping up together and hanging around with each other a little bit more.
Cool. Okay, so if you have a printout and you want to print that off and cut them out, you can collage them. If you want to try and draw some pronghorn, I actually decided that, they often stand like this. I see them out just hanging out, standing. But most of the time I see them just cruising away from me, right? And so I thought to challenge ourselves, maybe we would try to draw some antelope that are running away from us. And then this one, I just used regular white copy paper. So you're welcome to just use that for your drawing. And then I actually just used a little bit of watercolor on here to add a little color, but just tried not to use too much water to make the paper curl up. So I have sort of an example of that here that maybe you can see. I might need to adjust this again.
Oh, I knew this question was going to come up. Tristan says, how many pronghorn would you say Wyoming has total? It changes really frequently. But I would say right now we have probably about 400,000 pronghorn in the state of Wyoming, and that can range up and down from there. I'd say that 400,000 is maybe on the middle to lower end of what we normally expect there to be for the total number of pronghorn in the state. And Wyoming has easily more pronghorn than any other state where they range into, which is a lot of the states in the western part of the US and up into Canada.
Awesome. All right. So I'll talk for a second about this drawing, Heather, and then you can maybe talk about some of the parts of the pronghorn, about the tail and things like that as I'm going. The only thing I really want to mention about drawing, and really when it comes to any drawing, all you're really doing is looking for basic shapes. And I think of sketching as sort of searching. So my tips are to use a light pencil. Don't push real hard with your pencil so that you can erase if you need to, but don't worry too much about erasing. I think of sketching as searching. And with these antelope, I see kind of a heart shape here at the tail. And so I'm starting this guy with this. And you can go over and over and over the same spot if you do it really lightly, and you're not going to hurt anything. So as you find a line that you like, you can make it darker as you go. So if we're starting with his tail here, what always surprises me in drawing antelope is just how skinny their legs are.
They're really, really thin. And their bones are very delicate and lightweight. Which gives them that ability to run so fast, because if you really look at them, most of their mass is the main part of their body, and their legs almost just look like really light, thin sticks, and that gives them that ability, despite it looking kind of fragile. They have really powerful muscles and ligaments in the upper parts of especially their back legs, that really give them that get up and go to go cruising, like they are in the reference painting. So, that heart shape to their hind end is real. That's a real thing. And you'll notice that a lot of times when they are alarmed or excited, the fur, and you can see them in the reference painting doing this, the fur on that white heart-shaped rear end, they can actually hold and kind of bristle up and make it look bigger and brighter. And that's actually a visual reference for other pronghorn to see. If they see another pronghorn on the landscape that's doing that, they know that something is upsetting or frightening that other individual, and that gives them kind of an alert to be on the lookout for something. Cool. So a lot of times when they're running away from you, they will do that. They'll poof up that white fur on their rump. You'll also see fawns do this kind of all the time, like they're kind of figuring out what they can do. So pronghorn can raise and lower all of the fur on their body, and their hair is hollow and kind of brittle, but that helps them regulate their temperature. So you can imagine when they're running this fast, they can get really hot. So they can also kind of lift the hair away from their body to help release the heat from their body and cool themselves. And it's also how they can live out in such a wide open landscape. And they don't really, you'll see them laying down in the sun in the hottest part of the summertime, and it doesn't bother them because that heat, the hair on their body, because it's hollow, they can use it to kind of regulate their temperature and stay cool, even in the hot sun.
Cool. That's great. And the antlers have two two prongs, right? They always just have the two.
Mostly, yeah. There's always some exceptions. We always get some weirdos out there, but they usually have that front kind of triangle shaped part that usually is facing forward. That's the prong, or some people call that the cutter. And then they have the remaining part of their horn that goes up and kind of curls, usually inward. Sometimes those two curls will touch each other and make another heart shape on an antelope. Oh, you drew those so fast.
We're on a time crunch here.
Yeah. But yeah, that's you'll see those on the bucks, on the males, and females can have horns, but they're usually quite little, and they usually don't grow tall enough to get the little prong on the front.
And an important thing to remember too is the placement of the eyes. When you're drawing an animal, it's very important to pay attention to that. And antelope, it's very obvious that their eyes are placed really far on the sides of their head.
Yeah, and they have huge eyes compared to the rest of their body. In fact, if any of you were watching one of the earlier expo lives with the taxidermist, his name is Rusty. He's from Gillette, and he mentioned that when he does taxidermy work, that the pronghorn eyes are the largest. They're the same size as the eyes for a bison, which is a huge animal. So that tells you that pronghorn use their eyesight a lot, and the way their eyes are placed on the side of their head gives them a really wide range of view, so they can almost see behind themselves. And again, that's to help them detect predators in their wide open habitats. They can see for a huge distance. In fact, some people will say that that pronghorn vision is like your vision when you're looking through binoculars.
Crazy.
Yeah, they are a cool animal.
So this guy who's running, I like this really big, long, outstretched leg here at the back. And when you're drawing animals, it's pretty important to think about the perspective and how long one thing is in relation to another. So I use my pencil a lot when I'm measuring things. You can kind of say, okay, if you're looking at an image, you know, his leg is about that long. It's about the same length as his back in this drawing. You know, I made this back one maybe a little long, but that's okay. And now I'm just kind of going over the lines that I liked in my sketch with a black pen. And one of those paintings that we looked at, excuse me, for inspiration, had some really nice hatching lines, and that's a great way to show some detail or some texture in the fur just by making little easy lines or these sort of jagged lines where the fur is. And I'm just going to kind of color in the antlers here. Just color those in with black. Another thing you could do with this art activity, if you wanted to try and make another one, you could do one all in sunset colors, you know, with your watercolor, and just do the outline shape of the animal and color it all in black, or print off these black ones, and you can get a really cool like silhouette in a sunset. That would be a really fun project too. So we'll just kind of put some little hatching lines, and you can hatch or really dark areas, like maybe this back leg is dark. You can hatch them closer together, or you can cross hatch to show a really dark area. Where else do we need some? We need some lines here, and the lines will kind of curve to go with the shape of the body of the animal.
Oh, Tristan has another question for us. He says, says, after vision, what would you say pronghorn rely on more to stay safe, their noses or their ears? Oh boy, that's a tough one.
That's a great question.
It is. Noses or ears? You know, they do have a pretty good sense of smell. In fact, the male, the buck pronghorn, have a really strong scented gland underneath their cheek patch. So all the buck pronghorn are actually born with a black cheek patch, and you can use that to tell if it's a male or a female whenever you see a pronghorn, regardless of horn size, because because those bucks will actually shed that horn sheath. The black part of their horn comes off every year in November and December, and then they grow a new pair of horns every year. So when they've shed that the big part of their horn, they can look a lot like a doe, other than if you look at their face, they have that black cheek patch. And like I said, when they're born, when they're minutes old, they have a black cheek patch. It's not always big, but it's there. And underneath that, they have a scent gland that they use to rub on shrubs, on fence posts, and things like that to mark their territory. So they do use their sense of smell quite a bit. So I would say if and I could be wrong. I might need to like do some research on that and make sure that my answer is correct. But I would guess that their sense of smell is probably their second most important to vision. And like you said, vision is definitely number one. So yeah, the hash lines that you're adding kind of give it more of a three-dimensional, kind of gives them a little bit of, you can see their body is round by the way that you've added the hash marks and some shadowing.
Yep. You don't look quite so flat Stanley, right?
So hopefully folks are trying their hand at free drawing a pronghorn. I can't say that I would be any good at it. I do know that some of our expo coordinators are watching along with us and drawing. So I hope we all get to see their completed products as they go along.
Awesome. I hope so too.
Yeah, and all of you will be able to, and I please, I beg you, I want to see everybody's results when you're finished. You can post those when we're finished. You can't do it yet, but if when we're done with the session, you can go to the Game and Fish Facebook page and post it in the comments for this Expo Live, or you can go to Instagram and post it there and just tag us with at WY, and then it's Game and Fish, GAMEANDFISH. So definitely share your finished products. I bet we have a huge variety of all kinds of different artistic, creative contributions. I can't wait to see them.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut this out. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not going to try to follow the lines. I'm just leaving some white around it. And a good tip when you're cutting out more detailed things, turn the paper as you go instead of just trying to turn the scissors. If you keep your scissors straight and turn the paper, you'll have a lot easier time. And if you look again at our reference photo, can anybody spot Kuhn's signature on that painting? He had a really cool signature. He just signs Kuhn. Does anybody see it? I don't know if it's too small on there. He signs. He really hit it in this picture. It's kind of like a Where's Waldo? Where is it?
I cannot see it.
Not see it. Okay, it's in the lower left. And it's in red. I don't think it shows up in the other image either.
I can maybe barely see it.
Here. It's right here. See this really skinny K-U-H-N.
Nice. He blends it right.
Make sure that you sign your name too on your piece. Yeah. It's very important that you take ownership of your art and never apologize for your art either.
He's sneaky. He blended it in with the stems.
He did.
All right, hopefully everybody has either printed and cut out some of the pronghorn that Rachel provided, or you can do both. Tried your hand at drawing some, moving away like Rachel's just finished.
Yeah. Sometimes you can even take a little, if your watercolor water pan is dirty, sometimes that dirty water will just be enough, but mine's not quite dirty enough. So we'll grab another little spot of paint here. Do you want to talk about the coloring of pronghorn at all?
Sure. So it's kind of interesting. They're not really made to be very camouflaged. And I mean, you can see that we were just talking about their white rear end, and they actually use that to communicate with each other. And you'll see a lot of hoofed animals that are open country critters that live in open habitats, like open grasslands, plains, and like sagebrush grassland, like pronghorn. A lot of them have a white rump, and they use that to signal to each other because they can all see that across great distances, and kind of know what other groups are doing, or if anything's bothering them. But the one time I would say that they blend in really well is in the winter time, when we have a mix of snow and sagebrush and dead grasses that are kind of that brownish color. The way that pronghorn are different shades of tan and brown and white makes them really blend into a winter landscape. And maybe that's the best time for them to blend in, because if there are pockets of drifted snow and crusty snow across the landscape that they have to navigate around, it can make them more susceptible to predators during that time of the year. Other times of the year, they pop right off the landscape. When the grasses are green, you can see them plain as day. But they can also, get up and run forever if they need to in those times of the year.
Nice.
Yeah. But they do have really pretty coloration, especially their faces. Males, again, they have that black cheek patch, but they also a lot of times have a really dark colored nose. And does can have that dark nose as well. It just seems like there's a little bit more variation in the does where they might have a lighter face. Most of the bucks are going to have a really dark face. It's very, very striking and pretty.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm just adding a little bit of color to these guys just because we have time.
Sure.
And by now your painting might be drying. Let's see how mine's doing. Got some puddles. Maybe I'll make some more texture over here.
I forgot you have one that's done and one that's wet.
Make more art.
Yeah.
That's my advice. Make more. Oh, it's still wet. So if you peel the tape too early, it will tear the paper. So don't rush peeling your tape. Then whenever that's dry, you can choose a spot on your landscape to glue down your speed goats.
There you go.
And I kind of like mine over here, so I think I'm going to put them someplace over here. Generally speaking, if you put something smack dab in the middle of your painting, it won't be as interesting, but if you go a little off center, it makes it look a little bit more interesting. But that's probably about where I'll put these guys, but I can't do it quite yet. So
I like.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I like, again, you were talking about being able to tell when a subject is moving.
Yeah.
And I think that offsetting also kind of gives them, it's like it gives them a place to go. Like they're in one part of the painting and they're moving and running away into the background of the painting.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Back on this PowerPoint here, there's a note about showing us your work. We really would love to see what you've done. And then I wanted to mention something that the museum just started doing. This has been several years in the making, but last year we started creating an educational video outreach on YouTube called Bison Cast. And we have several episodes now, and it's really fascinating and fun. And then I'll mention what our upcoming exhibits are for the summer. We have a really exciting summer planned. Starting May 22nd, we have an exhibit called Unnatural Selections about wildlife in contemporary art. And then Valued Species, Animals in the Art of Andy Warhol and Ai Weiwei starts June 5th. And that's going to be a really exciting Ai Weiwei, who did he does some Lego art, which will be exhibited here alongside some Andy Warhol. And they have a really interesting relationship that we can explore with that exhibit. And then June 26th, we have Woven Together, Art and Arachnids, which is kind of a community collaborating exhibit where we're exploring spiders. And that one's going to be a lot of fun. And there's a Bison Cast episode called Beyond Beauty that talks about spiders in the environment and how who decides what is beautiful. And that's very interesting. So there, you can see I've signed my piece here, and that one is all done.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it. And I can't wait to see everybody's art. Oh, it looks like we may have some expo planners who are participating. Are you guys going to show off your stuff?
Hi. Yes.
Yay.
Yes. I don't know if show off is the right word, but Melissa,
show yours first.
Okay, I have.
Awesome.
Very good.
Look
Cool.
at that fabulous texture. Those beautiful colors.
Anyway, yeah. So it was kind of fun to be spraying, trying not to spray my office like Heather sprayed her kitchen. Yep. And Melissa, what do you got?
This is mine. I tried to blend, but I really enjoyed it. So thanks for doing it.
Fantastic. Yay. Those are great. Thank you so much for showing.
Cool.
Yes. Well, since we showed, we hope everyone else will show and take photos and put them in the comments or tag us on Instagram with them. You can watch this event and other previously recorded events at wyomingexpo.com and click on Expo Live or our YouTube channel or Facebook page. Heather, Rachel, thank you. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, that was great. I love the art. I love that there's pronghorn in there. I had a great time answering questions and working with Rachel. It was really cool. Thanks.
Thank you. I learned some stuff too from Heather, so that's great. Really fun.
All right. And I stopped by the National Museum of Wildlife Art in Jackson
Please do.
every day. They're open.
Please come see us. We'd love to have you.
All right. Thanks, y'all.